Welcome to the Imperial Truth. I'm your host, Eric, and today we're going to talk about forging a narrative again. We're going to do our part two, and we're going to talk about how to create a custom warband and sort of the basics to what you might look at and questions you might ask to create a custom warband in any game system. But we're going to focus on Horus Heresy. And yeah, I hope this is enjoyable for you and instructive and helpful. Uh, Again, with anything, please leave your or your comments in the discussion below. Uh, like, share, say a prayer to the machine god if you've enjoyed this video, and we'll continue on in this dynamic. So I want to start with a little bit of a disclaimer and a little discussion about gatekeeping. Everybody in this hobby enjoys the hobby in different ways. So just be aware of that. I remember there's a YouTube channel called, I think, Rerolling Ones. I watched a lot when I was playing Age of Sigmar years ago. I think they still do videos. And one of their players, Jack, his Stormcast army was in the Seattle Seahawks colors because he's a Seattle Seahawks fan, which is great. Not very narratively focused, but it's great, and they look good, and you enjoy playing. And look, dude, if that's the way you enjoy this game, by all means, do it. We had a guy at our local store who's a very good painter and a good player who painted a Nurgle army in Age of Sigmar up like characters from SpongeBob SquarePants, which again, not my cup of tea, not what I would do. But by all means, like, if it makes you happy, I'm not going to argue with it. So long as it's not offensive to anybody or doesn't hurt somebody, like, I'm not going to gatekeep your hobby. So just be aware that if you listen to this video and you're like, wow, this is just not my thing, that's fine. It doesn't have to be your thing, and you don't ever have to do it. If you want to try this out, you're not going to nail it the first time. If you've not written stories, if you've not written narratives, it's going to be hard. Like anything, writing is a skill. It's going to take practice, and it's going to take time for you to get to the point where you can articulate your narratives and whatnot. So hopefully this lays the groundwork for you and helps you feel like you can access this stuff. But again, don't feel like you have to come in here, like Guy Haley, and write this huge, elaborate backstory for your army from day one. And we'll talk about some of the tips at the end. So let's talk about what makes a compelling story first. So for me, some of the things I thought about when I was coming up with this was, we're fighting for a cause. Does the cause have to be just or good? No, it just has to be a cause. There is a reason why we're doing what we're doing. Instead of just fighting over objectives on a battlefield or little tokens on the battlefield, why are we even here? Another thing that makes that compelling story is against the odds fight. So like, when we're standing against some overwhelming force, when we are standing up for what we believe in, or what we want to accomplish against what is even perceived as being a stronger force, that's a good story. So and we'll talk about this in a minute. We'll talk about one of the pitfalls that people have with this in a minute. Another one is noble sacrifice. So are we dying for a purpose? And again, you don't have to be the good guy. If you think about someone like Argyle Tall from the first Heretic novel and Betrayer, like he's not a good person by the end, but he still makes this big sacrifice, and part of his sacrifice is becoming a bad person. So like, incorporate that into your story. Feel free to do that. You don't have to be a good guy to make a sacrifice. Conflicts are essential for a story, both internal and external. So I'm rereading the first 4 books of the Horus Heresy, which are probably some of the best books in the Heresy story. And Garviel Loken, like the conflicts he has with himself and the idea of him, like brotherhood versus loyalty to his ideals, is a big internal conflict. But also there are external conflicts between him and the lodge members are him and the other members of the Mournival. And so those conflicts are what drive the narrative, and being conflicted internally and being like, I don't know what to do. Or being like, I know what to do, but I know it's going to end badly. Those are really interesting and compelling aspects of a story. Hated villain narratives are always good. I hate Erebus. Lots of people hate Erebus, right? And we hate Erebus because he is a terrible, terrible person, right? So keep that in mind, that it is, if you're playing a traitor, or even if you're playing a loyalist, being hated is not necessarily bad. I think about the the crew of the Sisyphus, which we're going to mention again in a minute, and the acting captain, whose name escapes me right now, but he's an Iron Warrior and he's a complete dick. Or Atticus, which is another Iron Warrior who's a complete jerk. Those are good characters, right? Like they're, you read them and you're like, man, this guy sucks. But also, like, it plays to the story, right? And it adds conflict and it adds personality. Also unique characteristics, like what are things that set this character apart from other people. And I'm not talking about like Mary Sue stuff, and we're going to talk about sort of that pitfall in a minute. But specifically, like, what unique characteristics does this specific character bring to the table? So, for example, getting back to the Sisyphean, um, uh, um, uh, Mykonos Shuriken, right, is a Raven Guard, does all the stealth stuff and whatnot, but the shadow slipping is pretty cool. It's a pretty neat thing. It's not something we've seen elsewhere, or I think is probably, that's the first character that we sort of see that ability in. Having that ability to like add one cool thing in there, is neat. Or another one is in the Siege of Terra books, there is a world eater, and I'm sorry, their name escapes me. But they're an apothecary, right? But they're so lost to the nails that they can't be an apothecary anymore. That's a unique characteristic. Like the idea of an apothecary that's so lost to murder and killing and bloodshed that they literally can't do their duty anymore is a fun thing. And at one point they go to like extract gene seed, and they realize that all of their gene seed containment vials are broken because they've just been so violent in their fighting, and they literally just can't do their job. And it's almost a sad moment for that character. So all of those things are like when we're thinking about this, don't be afraid to like take inspiration from other aspects of story writing and storytelling, and learn from other people's skills. Some example warbands I think are really cool, and kind of go to for me personally when I'm thinking about like how I'm writing things. Saul Tarvitz and the Loyalists on Istvan, this band of brothers making a last stand in a hopeless battle, and just saying we're going to bleed them as much as possible. These are warriors that have been forced together by circumstance, but are now more closely bonded to each other than they would be for to members of their own legions at that point. Really beautiful story. I would love a novel of just those months, because that Istvan 3, between the point when they virus bomb and they finally fall to the traitors, that's supposed to be over months. So if they ever put out a book that was just that story, I would eat that up. That's such a great story, and such a great aspect of that, and would make a great army theme. I mean, it would be for just that one campaign, but like if you think about a group, let's imagine they got away. What would that look like in terms of an army after the fact? Because you're all traitor legions. You can't wear your colors, right? So do you have a Black Shield group led by Saul Tarvitz, and it's a combination of World Eaters and Emperor's Children and Sons of Horus, all kind of like mixed together, and they all fight together, their own unique fighting styles. I mean, like that would be a really cool Black Shield force, sort of like reimagining what happens if they get away. The Serrated Sun slash Gal Vorbak is another great one. Sort of the fall of that force and what binds them together, and specifically like Argol Tull and his like elite command squad that he goes around with. Like, there's a lot of character in there, a lot of conflict, a lot of like loss and hardship as well. The idea of new troops coming in that don't share that same experience, didn't have that experience in the Eye of Terror, and maybe aren't quite as genuine to the ideals of the Gal Vorbak. I forget exactly what book. I was trying to find it, but there's a Keys of Hell storyline with the Iron Warriors, where they basically turn Iron Warriors into cybernetic troops. It's really dark. It's really dark because it basically steals the personalities and the independence of their brother warriors in order to turn them into undying, unthinking, uncaring automata because the flesh is weak. And I think they even do it to a maybe a I'm trying. It's been a while since I read that book, but it actually goes over several books. I think maybe they do it to an Imperial Fist too, or a Salamander. I feel like somebody else gets caught up in that and gets turned into one. But yeah, that's a great hook for a warband. Barabbas Dantiok, the Iron Warrior loyalist who leads his troops against the Iron Warriors and flees to Macragge and gets under Gilliman's protection. Like, another great idea of a warband, a bunch of Iron Warriors that are just freaking done with it and just disaffected with the idea of Perturabo and his like pouting and sadness and just loyal to the Emperor. And yeah, that's a great storyline too. And then of course the crew of the Sisypheum, which are sort of there's mainly Iron Warriors, but also a couple Salamanders and one Raven Guard that are kind of together, and it might only be one Salamander. I think it's Atticus has several Salamanders, but anyway, it's these Broken Legion groups that are kind of moving around, doing things, kind of popping up in the storyline, fighting behind enemy lines, adopting new fighting styles, utilizing new technologies, right? Things like that. Just when you're thinking about what your warband might look like, consider all those things, right? None of them are particularly overpowered or crazy or over the top. All of them have flaws. All of them have conflicts. All of them suffer loss, right? All of those things add to the narrative. In fact, I'm going to pop up some narrative prompts, and we're going to go through these and talk about each one in turn. And when you're writing, I would encourage you to sit down with a list like this and answer these questions before you start to really dig into things and come up with these answers. So at the very core, why do we fight? Why are we even doing this? Are we pirates? Are we loyalists? Are we traitors? Are we something else? Are we interested in some other aspect of this? Are we like Barthusa Narek, and I just want to kill Lorgar for what he did to our legion, right? Like, why are we here? Why are we fighting? And where do we get our identity? One of the aspects that Garvio Loken goes through with the first four books is this concept of identity. Am I a Luna Wolf? Am I Sons of Horus? Am I a member of the Mournival? Am I not? Who am I? And where does my loyalty come from? And spoilers, we see at the end at the Siege of Terra, Garvio Loken pops up in Luna Wolf's colors because that's his identity, right? So think about, what is your identity? Who are you? What do you? Why are you here? Why are you fighting? What things make us unique? Now, be really careful with this, because sometimes people like to go down this sort of like rabbit hole of uniqueness where they make their like super overpowered, super crazy, super wild, um, uh, uh, um, like original character idea, and that's not good writing. I was trying to think of a way to say it nicely. It's just not good writing, right? What makes us unique is things that are manageable and reasonable, right? So again, the world eater's apothecary, or maybe you have some sort of like I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head that could be interesting. But yeah, white scars that were traitors that came to get forgiveness from the Khan, right? Like that's a unique thing. There weren't a lot of those units. So yeah, that would be a good unique aspect. What are our conflicts, both internal and external? Where are we fighting? What things do we struggle with? Do we struggle with our identity? Do we struggle with the things that make us unique? Is that part of that conflict? Are our conflicts, do we get along with other loyalists? Maybe we don't. Maybe we don't like other loyalists. Maybe we are Black Shields who are, who are Black Shield Thousand Sons. We really freaking hate Space Wolves, even though they're our allies. We don't like them very much, right? Like maybe that's an aspect of this. How did we get here? At what point did the heresy begin to affect us? When did this become real for us? Was it on Istvan? Or was it some other thing where we stationed on some were we iron we were stationed on some backwater thankless hopeless outpost that we were just holding because had to hold it, and nobody cares that we were there, and nothing mattered. And then one day we found out about the heresy, and we were like, whoa, we're not traitors. What is that where our story starts, right? Like, how did we get to this place? And what are our goals? What do we want to do? Are we seeking a path of redemption? Are we just trying to take as many of them with us as we can before we die? Is this a hopeless cause? Is it a hopeful cause? Do we have some cargo that we're trying to deliver somewhere? Do we have some bigger objective, or are we just trying to hurt them a lot before they finally kill us, right? What are our goals? What are we doing in the greater scheme of the galaxy? What are their challenges, limitations, and flaws? Do we have limited resources? Is our ship good, or is it really damaged? Do we need ships? Do we not have ships? Do we need to get ships? Is that part of this? Do we have a limited number of troops? Maybe we are suffering, we're loyalist emperor's children, and we're suffering from gene seed problems with, I think it's the blight or something. They have some sort of like gene seed issue. Maybe that's our problem. Maybe we've got degrading gene seed that's we're having problems with. Maybe we're a unit of space wolves, and we were fighting some chaos tainted foes, and we started to undergo the Wolfen curse, and we're trying to hide that. We're trying to keep that from people, right? Maybe we're traitor blood angels, and we really like eating people when we kill them, right? Like, come up with some ideas about why you're there, and what your flaws are. Who are our main adversaries? Who do we hate? Who don't we get along with, right? I'm tempted to always make space wolves my adversaries because I hate them in real life. But yeah, who are your enemies? Who are you trying to get back at? Did somebody wrong you and you're hunting them down and trying to get to them? If you were in battle and you saw, like we think about, like, again, the crew of the Sisyphean, when they see Fulgrim, they're just like, we gotta fucking kill this guy, man. Sorry, I try not to swear on this podcast. I apologize. I will try to do that better. But they were just like, yeah, we're just gonna kill this guy. Yeah, is that our thing? And what are the deeper meanings? And deeper meanings are a little bit outside of your narrative prompts. Deeper meanings are going to be aspects that make this story unique and special for you. And I'll talk about some of those in a minute. So I'm going to introduce you to the Syrtis Cohort, which is my Mechanicum force. And this is the narrative that I've worked out for them so far. We're still working on it, still work in progress, and probably always will be. It's a little bit like painting. It takes time to do. So The reason for Syrtis, this name is for the Syrtis Major Quadrangle, which is a place on Mars. It's a real place, and it's where the Perseverance rover landed. So the Perseverance rover landed in a the Jezero crater, which is in this quadrangle. And the Perseverance rover, if you're not familiar with it, is specifically there to look for signs of alien life. So it's got to do with astrobiology, which is a field that I am actually trained in and very interested in doing research in. So that's sort of my deeper meaning here. That's why we go with Syrtis Quadrangle. It's also not close to anywhere else of note on Mars. So I can carve out this place for me, and I can say, this is mine, this is my little area. And yeah, it's not going to interfere with any major storylines. They're attached to the 583rd Expeditionary Fleet under the Iron Warriors. So I am building slowly an Iron Warriors force. I don't know if I'm going to continue to build it, but I did. So they're going to be attached to the Iron Warriors. Then the Syrtis Cohort was at Istvan 5 with the Iron Warriors, though they didn't fight in the fighting because that was in a Syrtis conflict. So they stayed in orbit doing their thing. And when Vulcan and the Salamanders got nuked, Carlin Thex, my Archmagos, was like, nope, we are out of here. This is not a winnable fight, and I'm not going to stick around and risk my ship getting aborted and controlled by traitors under these circumstances. And so Carlin Thex is the Archmagos that leads this cohort, and the Spear of Elathan is the ship that they are on. And I want to point out real quick that I'm trying to keep it simple, trying to keep everything. I don't have a big fleet. I don't have some. We'll talk about it in a minute. I don't have some big. I forget what the big Mechanicum ships are called, but I don't have one of those. It's keep it simple because that's easier to write. It's easier to write with a smaller crew and fewer characters and a smaller fleet and that sort of thing. We can attach ourselves to bigger things, but yeah. So narrative prompts, let's talk about these with regard to the Syrtis Cohort. Why do we fight? We fight for survival. We fight to hurt them, and we fight to preserve order in the galaxy. Where do we get our identity? From the cult Mechanicus and worship of the Omnissiah. What makes us unique? Well, Carlin Thex and their Archmagos that are under them, they don't believe that the Emperor is God, is the Omnissiah. They think that anybody who created flawed Primarchs who would rebel, and the heresy is very much a crisis of faith for them. That anybody who couldn't see that coming is clearly not divine. And so they don't worship the Emperor, but they acknowledge that the Imperium is a force of order in the galaxy. So they are loyalists to an extent. But yeah, that makes them unique, right? They're not these dogmatic worshipers of the Emperor. Instead, they're sort of like, we're going along with you because the other side is really bad. But we don't necessarily think that you're right either, and that's going to have to be solved later. That's a problem for down the road. What are the conflicts? All right, so internal conflicts are Carlin Thex doesn't believe in the Emperor as the Omnissiah anymore, so that's an internal conflict that's really a big problem. Also, there are internal conflicts between the crew. The different Magos that are in the group have different ideas of how the war should be fought, and they're in conflict with each other. They're not all in agreement. We're going to see the Myrmidax Magos thinks that they should fight harder and should just sell their lives in a glorious end for their side. External and also Carlin Thex and Magos, an Archmagos, they don't have the same empathy and sympathy and compassion that a baseline human would have. And we're going to find out that one of their crew members is a salamander. And because of that, there is an internal conflict there. External conflicts, these guys are against the traitor legions, but also not particularly on board with some of the stuff that the Imperium does, especially when it comes down to sacrificing Mechanicum assets for the quote unquote greater good of the Imperium. From their perspective, the Mechanicum is the greater good. And so, leaving behind assets or even abandoning Mechanicum Forge Worlds is not good. And they'll fight against loyalists in order to preserve any Mechanicum forces that are out there. How did we get here? They were on Isstvan 5. They saw the treachery and saw what happened and did the calculus and decided that we can't win this. There's no reason we're not going to make a marginal difference to this. So we're done. We're out. We'll fight it a different way. What are their goals? Their goals are to hurt the War Master's forces and the traitors as much as possible, while also trying to marshal and preserve as much of the Mechanicum abroad as they can. That's it. That's what they want to do. Their goal is at the end of the conflict that the Mechanicum is strong enough that it can stand alone and break free from the Imperium once the War Master's forces are defeated. What are their challenges, limitations, and flaws? They have limited resources. They're one ship and one crew and one small cohort amidst a huge galaxy. Now, thankfully, a lot of their forces are Thalaxi and Ursarax and Castellax, things that can be rebuilt over and over and over again. But yeah, they don't have a lot. They can't drop huge titans or anything like that into battle. And so they're left doing the best that they can with what they have. Who are the main characters and adversaries? Well, we'll talk about the main characters. Their main adversaries are the Night Lords, just because I like the Night Lords story fictionally, who are sort of their big bad enemy, but also members of the Dark Mechanicum. They really hate the Dark Mechanicum. They see that as a huge corruption of the purity of the machine. And they will, again, kind of go out of their way to destroy Dark Mechanicum forces when they are there. And we talked about the deeper meanings of the Syrtis Cohort and the kind of connections to my own personal life outside of the game. And I think those things are fun. You have to come up with names, and so why not make the names kind of fun for you? With that said, let's talk about a name. This is Carlin Thex. Carlin Thex is an exogeologist, so a little bit tied to my field. Archmagos of the Syrtis Cohort, Explorator Primus, and Principia Cybernetica. Carlin's name, Thex is just there because it's fun to say, but Carlin is derived from Carl or Charles. And if you're familiar with science history at all, Charles Darwin, Carl Woese, Carl Stetter, Carl Linnaeus, Charles Dodgson, like there's just a whole bunch of really interesting characters through history that have that name. So Carlin is a good name. I imagine they looked through the archives and saw this name pop up a lot with a lot of people who were into mathematics and different types of sciences, and were like, this is a good name. They were previously in charge of the geologic surveys of newly discovered and compliant worlds. So you land on a world, you have to understand sort of how that world formed and where the geologic deposits are and what geologic resources are there. And so a little bit like as the European Americans expanded westward in the colonization of the United States, we had the U.S. Geologic Survey go through and do surveys of all of the geology in every state to kind of figure out what was there and categorize it. In the same way, I would imagine that the Mechanicum has some sort of geologic survey that they go around and they land on a planet and they're like, okay, the first planet here is this rocky planet, and here are its characteristics, and here's its density, and here's what its crust is made out of, and this is the sort of resources we can get from it. The second planet is like this, and they probably do something like that for the Mechanicum as well. And so Carlin Thex, that's their job. They were supposed to go with the 583rd Expeditionary Force under the Iron Warriors and conquer planets, and then come through and do the surveys and move on. Currently, Karlin Thex is fighting an insurgency against Horus, fighting against the forces of the War Master, but does not believe the Emperor is the Messiah, which is a little bit heretical and a little bit of a problem and a little bit of a crisis of faith. But to be honest, like, would a god or would the representative of a god make such an egregious mistake as the Primarchs? Probably not. And so this is Karlin Thex is not doing okay when it comes to their faith. But they are sort of managing. They're building. They still believe in the Omnissiah and the power of the motive force and the machine god and all of those things. They just don't think it's the emperor. They don't think the emperor is that person. They think maybe they got a little bit duped, and so they want to sort of be careful in the future with that. Yeah, they're very opposed to chaos, though. They do not like chaos. They think that chaos is a bane on the galaxy. That the mechanicums, the dark mechanicums, fall to chaos is egregious and gross. And that corruption, that unpredictability of chaos is anathema to order and logic and reason. And so they are very, very opposed to the chaotic side of things. They command the Spear of Alathan, which is their ship. Now, this Arx Mechanicus is the word. It's not an Arx Mechanicus, which I think is what this image is. So Arx Mechanicus are big, gigantic, huge, like flying forge worlds, if you're not familiar. And you might be like, well, I'm going to put my Archmagos on an Arch Mechanicus. And that's fine. You can do that. But just be aware that, like, you don't have to. You can do something else. So Alatha is an Irish mythological character that's associated with the sun and knowledge, and a little bit of a fun side because I like when Mechanicum screw things up, and so I screwed this up on purpose. A little bit in the weeds here, but Alathan is a word that was coined by Lady Gregory, who is a big translator of Irish myths and a big reason why we have any Irish myths at all, despite the attempts of the British people to completely eradicate that culture. And one of the things that she did was she said, there's this word Alatha, that's the god. And so she interpreted Alathan as being of that god, right? So of Alatha, by adding that N in Gaelic. That is not the way it works. And that's a mistranslation, but I like the fact that the mistranslation has been put into the name, the Spear of Alathan, because it basically means the spear of Alathan, based on the mistranslation. But I like when Mechanicum stuff has sort of that weird, like, we've preserved knowledge, but sort of bastardized it at the same time. So it's kind of a fun aside. Their ship, the Spear of Alathan, is a Dark Age gravity cannon, massive gravity cannon that can basically fire essentially a miniaturized black hole at something, and is incredibly destructive, but is also very energy intensive. So it doesn't fire fast. The ship's not particularly mobile. It's not good in combat. It's good at shooting long distances and supporting from afar, but it's not, you're not going to win any like dogfights with it. But the entire ship, a little bit like an A-10 Warthog, which is sort of the idea behind this, is built around the gun. And so the Mechanicum workshops and crew, they're there for the sacred Dark Age technology. That's why they're on that ship. And one of the reasons why Karlin Thex decided to run away from Istvan, because that's a sacred piece of technology that they don't want to fall into the hands of the traitors. The other main character in my narrative right now is this guy named Tech Marine Ogonwe. Ogonwe is a Salamander's legionary, and his name comes from Ogun, who is a spirit of metalworking in Africa. So I thought it was kind of a nice homage to that. And like lots of people who want to become Tech Marines, he was apprenticed under the Mechanicum. And part of that apprenticeship, part of that learning was being sent to the Spear of Alathan and working under Karlin Thex. Now, Ogono was present at Isstvan 5. He was on the ship, but he didn't land because the mechanic contingent didn't land. And he really wanted to land, and he really wanted to see his Primarch, but he wasn't able to do it. And he had to sort of watch in horror as the Salamander's forces got nuked. And as far as he knows, Vulcan is dead. And all of the salamanders are dead, and he might be the last salamander in the galaxy. So he's incredibly isolated. And to make matters worse, he was maimed really badly, lost his left arm and left leg in Night Lord's boarding action at Isstvan, fighting off the Night Lords. He did successfully drive them off, but he lost significant portions of his body in return, which have been replaced by cybernetics that were made by Karlin Thex in sort of a weird moment of empathy from the Archmagos. But he bears both the physical and the emotional scars of this. And I wrote this character when I was going through a really dark place, feeling very alone, unfortunately participating in self-harm, trying to find a purpose in life. And this was sort of my way to work through some of those ideas. So Ogunwe is isolated. He's on a ship with tech adepts and Magoses and his mentor, Karlin Thex, but none of them are his friends. None of them are particularly empathetic. None of them have a lot in common with him. None of them are Space Marines. He doesn't know if there's any other salamanders out there. He may be the only one from that. And if you're familiar with salamander lore, there's a lot of ritual scarring and ritual burning in that. And so he tries to sort of get into that. He starts to try to participate in that to attempt to sort of carry out that Prometheum creed that the salamanders participate in, or the Prometheum cult. But he doesn't really know what the Prometheum cult is. He wasn't inducted into that entirely. And so his versions of these aren't about purity and purification and ritual. They are very much about causing physical pain to sort of blot out the emotional pain that's there. So this is sort of the main character of the Warband, and he struggles with finding purpose and finding, why are we still fighting? Why are we even doing this? Why are we trying? His torso is covered in scars, marking different legionaries that he's killed. So he has a bunch of Night Lords symbols on his chest and a bunch of World Eaters symbols. And like every time he kills one, he burns their icon onto him as sort of a mark of that tally. But yeah, it's a dark storyline, but it's really fun to sort of explore, what does it mean to lose everything if you're a Space Marine and you're built for Brotherhood, and even not be able to fight all the time, like because his role is more of a Magos. His job is to repair the constructs and rebuild, the bodies of the Thalax and things like that. He's not out there bashing heads like some warriors are. And so yeah, it's an interesting sort of dynamic of the character. My newest character for this warband is Adakul Nu. The NUE comes from one of the geologic designations in the Jezero crater where the Perseverance rover fell, which is kind of fun. This is a Myrmedox Magos. It's like I said, it's the newest of my characters, so it's the least fleshed out. But he recently killed a Thousand Suns character in a single challenge, which is kind of fun. And he's exploring what does it mean to walk the path of the Myrmidon, and how is that different than where Karlin Thex is, which is this guy really wants to fight, dude. Like, he just really wants to fight. He wants to go kill people. He wants to kill traitors. He wants to take names. He's pumped. He's ready. He's ready to go kill things. And this introduces some conflicts to the Syrtis cohort. This idea that we have this Magos who's very, very militant, very aggressive, very interested in fighting and testing themselves against Space Marines, and wants to go out and have those fights. Whereas Karlin Thex is much more about marshaling their strength and being careful and being cautious and considering the mathematics of what they're doing, and only getting into conflicts where they're going to get more out of it than they put into it. Whereas Adakul Nu is more of a fatalist. He's more like, we're going to die no matter what, we need to go kill as many of them as possible. So hopefully that was kind of fun. Let's talk about how you can do this, how you can start to build these things. So I would begin, if you haven't done this before, I would begin with a very simple concept or hook. Pick a warband, pick a ship, pick a specific character, pick just one thing that you're going to write about. And it doesn't have to be the whole thing. Don't feel like you need this, treat it like you're building things in sequence and in components. So we're going to pick one thing and flesh it out. We're going to flesh it with those narrative prompts that I gave you earlier. You're going to sit down and you're going to be like, okay, this is my character, and these are the things I want to build about this character. And you're going to gradually introduce those things. Again, you don't have to answer them all right now, but just start the process of thinking about like, how does this character think? Flesh out the narrative and the prompts, and very importantly, be unique but not a unicorn, which I think is a fun way to put this. You can create a character like Ogunwe that is unique, right? As a salamander, he's separated, he's working with Mechanicum, right? That's different. That makes him unique. But don't try to be a unicorn. Don't try to be like, be like, I have this edgy Blood Angels character that has fallen to the red thirst, and they have wings just like Sanguinius, and they're leading their, and they have this pseudo magical dark age pistol that just eviscerates everything, and they're just so awesome and bad and drink blood, and like that's probably not a good character, right? So try not to go that way. Like pick some unique characteristics. What makes this character different than other people? But don't go so far that you're creating this original character that's just crazy and wild, right? It would be completely reasonable to say that you have a World Eaters librarian that wasn't with the World Bearers when they went into the 500 worlds during the Shadow Crusade, and was kind of separated from everyone. And like you could have a World Eaters librarian who never had the butcher's nails, and it is unique in that way. But like don't go too far, the other way with it. So that you create these unicorns, because it's just not a fun way to write and explore things. Flaws and weaknesses are just as important as strengths. Try and do a 1-to-1 ratio with your strengths and weaknesses. If you create a strength, create a weakness, not to counter it, but as a balancing point, right? So if you're going to give a character 3 really strong characteristics, give them 3 weaknesses as well. Those weaknesses are what make our characters fun and engaging. And yes, Karn is a great character, and he's super good at combat, and he's super fun to read. But also remember that Karn struggles with the nails and struggles with that conflict inside, and fights that battle constantly. Also, Karn is a great fighter, but also doesn't care about fighting in the fighting pits. So like that's an interesting aspect. That's maybe not a weakness, but is definitely a sort of a weird aspect for a World Eater. It makes them different, but not necessarily stronger, just different, just unique, right? Aspects like that are great when we introduce them into characters and allow them to flourish, right? Lucius is a great character. He's an amazing swordmaster, probably one of the best in all of the legions, but also is so arrogant and is so self-centered and egotistical that it's almost unbearable, right? So again, anytime you give your character a strength, be sure to pop in a weakness as well for them. In terms of leveling up your writing and getting from creating the character concept to the next stage, I'm going to give you a couple pieces of advice. And I'm not, by all means, guys, I am not an amazing writer. I'm not a professional writer. I'm very much mediocre, but it's fun to do, and I enjoy doing it. So hopefully this will inspire you a little bit. So first of all, dive into character, right? if I have a character like Ogonwe, I can pull from my own real life experiences to talk about that character and put those things in there. You can do that. That is sort of I would say that's sort of like the base level, right? That's the easiest way to write. The next level up is to step outside of your brain and try and figure out like what would this character do outside of what I would do? Like how are they different than me, and how can I use empathy and understanding to inform how this character is going to behave? So I personally am not a particularly a violent person, and I don't, glorify war in my own life. I'm not the type of person. I don't like fighting. I don't even like movies where people get hurt, right? So trying to get into the mindset of a Myrmidon and understand what it's like to have war be your entire personality is interesting, right? And that's going to be, I'm looking forward to that aspect as I sort of write new parts of my army and new fiction and new stories that can incorporate that, right? Like, how can you do that? You can challenge yourself and draw from your own experiences simultaneously to create these things. And if you do it right, you can create characters that are very unique from you, but are still very believable. You read them and you're like, yeah, no, I can totally see this being the way that you would respond in this specific situation. And my last piece of advice is actually one from one of the Games Workshop writers. I think maybe Jervis Johnson, this is from. And that is to kill your darlings. Do not be afraid to write something and throw it away. Or I suggest you never throw anything away in a digital age. I think you save it to a file that is like your boneyard. That's literally one of my files. And that's just where I throw ideas that I don't like anymore. But you can always come back to them and steal parts of them and scavenge them, right? So that's always fair. But don't be afraid to throw things away. Don't be afraid to get to something and be like, this is not working. I'm going to get rid of it. Or this is working. This is a great character. I'm totally going to kill them, right? I mean, Saul Tarvitz is probably my favorite character in the entire Horus Heresy series. Maybe he's up there, and he dies in book 3. Like, he dies early, and I think that that's a good thing sometimes. Taking your character that you really like and killing them, or injuring them, or wounding them, or doing bad things to them, right? Like, create a story in which they have to go through it. Again, like, you think about, characters that die in stories. The quintessential one is Eddard Stark in the Game of Thrones books, right? Like, if you've read those books and you didn't know what was coming, like, when that happened, you were like, what? No, right? So, like, don't be afraid to do that. It's totally okay. And it's part of the fiction writing process. Is you're going to write stuff and you're not going to like it, you're going to throw it away. That's totally okay. You're going to write stuff and you're going to like it, and sometimes you're going to kill those characters, or write them out of the story because you're going to move on to other ideas or other aspects, or you're going to come up with something that you think is better or more fun. Anyway, as always, thanks for sticking around for this long. Thanks for hanging out. I hope this was fun. If this was fun, if this was instructional, let me know, and we can have more conversations about it in the future. Maybe we can do a live stream and workshop some ideas. Yeah, it's a fun aspect of the hobby for me. I enjoy painting. These are my models. I have fun with that. I have fun playing, but I also have fun building stories and kind of engaging in all of the aspects of the game. And if you want to try this, go ahead and give it a shot. It's not going to hurt anything. Even if you do it and you're like, this is not for me, I'm not very good at this, that's fine. Or if you're not good at it for months and months and months, it's a skill. It takes practice. You're going to have iterations. Maybe start small. Maybe find a sergeant in one of your units who did something miraculous. I have a sergeant in my Iron Warriors who stood on an objective for turn after turn after turn against Thousand Suns, rolled double ones for one of their leadership saves, And yeah, I mean that would be a character that you could start with and talk about that specific person who was the only survivor of their squad and what that does to a person and how that makes them feel, and like the combination of being lauded for like your bravery and your stoicism and your valor in battle, but also struggling with the idea that you've lost all of your battle brothers and friends, and now you're in a new squad. And that's actually the sorry, that's sort of the plot line of my favorite 40K novel that isn't a Space Marine novel, which is the Steel Tread story, which is a great story, such a great story, and that's kind of the premise of it. So yeah, that's a great starting off point. What does that do to somebody? How do they feel? How do they integrate into their new squad? How does their squad feel about being attached to somebody who lost everybody? Do they have a little bit of an attitude towards them? Why is he leading a squad now? What happened to the squad? Is it several broken squads that are put together and they don't really get along, or was just the sergeant killed in the other squad? Now he's been ported over, and they don't really trust him because he's the outsider. He's the only one who's different, right? Maybe there's, maybe he's Terran and they're Olympian, or something like that, and they don't like him, or maybe he's lowborn, and they're higher born, or used to higher borns, being their officers. Anyway, just kind of spitballing ideas for something like that. That's the sort of mindset where you can start and then kind of build out and have some fun with it. Anyway, that is it for today. If you like this, like, subscribe, share, talk in the comments, burn some incense to the machine god, and I'll see you guys in our next video.